The desert has always been a place where the world's greatest secrets go to hide. In the daylight, it stretches endlessly in every direction, golden and silent, a landscape that seems untouched by time. But at night, under a sky so vast it swallows your breath, the desert transforms into something else. It becomes a place of whispers, a place of shadows, a place where the line between reality and myth has always been dangerously thin. Nowhere is this truer than in New Mexico, a land whose soil carries some of the most enduring mysteries in American history. It was here, nearly 80 years ago, that the US military claimed to have recovered a simple weather balloon, while witnesses insisted they had seen something far stranger. It was here that the term flying saucer was born, and it is here, according to a growing number of recent testimonies, that the past may have echoed into the present. In early 2025, a story began circulating quietly through online forums, pilot chatter, and private messaging channels used by military personnel. At first, it sounded like another conspiracy theory, the kind that burns brightly for a moment before fading into the noise of the internet. But as the days passed, the whispers grew louder. More witnesses spoke, more details emerged, and soon, what began as a rumor evolved into a chilling possibility that an unidentified craft had crashed somewhere in the remote New Mexico desert, triggering a rapid and highly unusual military response. The claims were consistent across multiple accounts. Late at night, in the cold quiet of early January, residents in several rural towns reported hearing a deep, resonant boom, not like an explosion, but something far heavier, as if the sky itself had cracked. Some described a light streaking across the horizon, bright enough to illuminate the mesas. Others claimed that moments after the boom, their phones and radios flickered with static, their power lines humming strangely, as though something invisible had passed overhead. Then came the aircraft. Within minutes, according to several locals, low-flying helicopters swept across the desert, their searchlights carving through the darkness. Military trucks followed. A few witnesses said they saw vehicles driving without headlights, navigating purely by infrared. One described a convoy of unmarked black SUVs racing down an old service road that had been abandoned for decades. Curiously, some of the roads used that night had been closed to the public for years, and yet residents reported hearing vehicles roaring across them at high speed. The next morning, people who lived within 40 miles of the alleged crash zone woke to find access points blocked, fenced areas newly expanded, and patrol units stationed where there had never been patrols before. Locals attempting to drive near the restricted sections were told that military exercises were underway, but the region had seen exercises before, and no one could recall any that involved this level of secrecy. What made the story impossible to ignore was that by the end of January, pilots flying out of Holloman Air Force Base began whispering about a sudden, unexplained cleanup operation that had closed off large swaths of airspace over southern New Mexico. Some said they received temporary no-fly notices that were far more aggressive than usual. Others said they were rerouted mid-flight without explanation. A few claimed that air traffic controllers seemed unusually tense, warning them to avoid certain coordinates for reasons that were classified. Still, these were only whispers, rumors, nothing that could be verified until the video surfaced. A 2-minute clip uploaded to an anonymous account appeared briefly on social media before being removed, yet not quickly enough to prevent it from spreading. In the shaky footage, recorded in night vision, several military vehicles sit in a half-circle around a crater-like indentation in the ground. A reflective object of some kind, appears partially buried at the center. The object seems metallic, but not like metal that belongs on Earth. Its surface is smooth, almost liquid-like, catching the faint glow of the surrounding lights and bending it unnaturally. The soldiers in the video move cautiously. They are wearing full protective suits. One of them appears to be scanning the object with a handheld device that emits a narrow beam of blue light. In the background, an officer gestures aggressively at the camera before the recording abruptly ends. Skeptics insisted it was fake, a fabrication, CGI, misinformation. But the detail, the lighting, the behavior of the personnel, it all looked unsettlingly real. And then came something far stranger. Within hours of the video's release, Several of the online accounts that had shared it suddenly went silent, not deleted, just inactive. Witness posts disappeared, threads closed. In one case, a user who had uploaded a high-resolution frame claimed that their phone had been remotely wiped. It didn't take long before people began using a word rarely spoken outside of conspiracy circles: suppression. Of course, extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. And while the video was not proof in itself, the timing could not have been more suspicious. Just months earlier, in late 2024, NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory had quietly logged an unidentified atmospheric event over New Mexico. A spike of electromagnetic interference that lasted only a few seconds but was strong enough to disrupt nearby sensors. At the time, it was dismissed as noise, but looking back, some began to wonder whether these two events were connected. Then there were the testimonies. A retired Air Force radar technician living in Albuquerque claimed he had seen unusual activity on classified systems that same night. A rancher near the alleged site described finding strange glass-like fragments scattered across his property, unlike anything he had encountered in decades of living on the land. A firefighter in Las Cruces reported hearing that a hazardous material retrieval team had been deployed out of White Sands missile range, though no such deployment appeared in official logs. Separately, none of this would mean much, but together the pieces formed a troubling mosaic. The intensity of speculation increased dramatically when mainstream outlets began commenting on the story, not because they had proof of a crash, but because the Pentagon had refused to answer a simple question: were any aircraft lost or recovered in New Mexico during the early hours of January 13, 2025? The official response: we have no information to share at this time. Not a denial, not an explanation, just silence. The kind of silence that fuels the imagination. The narrative grew darker when several military analysts pointed out that New Mexico is home to some of the most secure and secretive facilities in the United States. White Sands, Los Alamos, Kirtland, Holloman, sites where some of the most advanced research programs in the world are conducted. Sites where experimental aircraft are developed, tested, and often hidden. If something unusual were to fall from the sky, this would be the ideal place to hide it. But perhaps the most chilling aspect of the New Mexico incident is how closely it mirrors the events of Roswell. Not the story that was printed in newspapers, but the story whispered behind closed doors for generations. A crash, rapid military response, a cover story, witness intimidation, a mysterious object removed under the cover of night. Nearly 8 decades later, the pattern has not changed. Some believe this is because the government knows exactly how to manage these situations. Others believe it is because the crashes themselves have never stopped. That what happened in 1947 was not an isolated incident, but the beginning of a long, hidden history of crashes, recoveries, and reverse engineering programs. Programs that people like David Grush claim to have uncovered while working in government intelligence. Could the New Mexico crash of 2025 be the latest chapter in that hidden history? The US government has repeatedly admitted that it cannot explain certain aerial phenomena. Former Navy pilots have described craft with instantaneous acceleration, sudden stops, and non-ballistic movement. Senator Marco Rubio has stated publicly that multiple high-ranking individuals have described legacy programs involving recovered materials of unknown origin. Whistleblowers have testified under oath that non-human craft may exist inside secured facilities. If these claims are true, even partially, then a crash retrieval in New Mexico is not only plausible, it may be expected. One must also consider the geopolitical climate. As the world edges toward an era of transparency about UAPs, the stakes have never been higher. Nations compete for technological dominance. Intelligence services scramble for any advantage. If a craft were to fall into US territory, the government would not simply investigate it. It would seize it, secure it, and move it somewhere safe long before the public knew anything had happened. This leads us to a critical question. If such a crash occurred, where would the recovered object be taken? Experts point to several possibilities. One is Sandia National Laboratories, a facility known for its work on advanced physics and materials research. Another is Dugway Proving Ground in Utah, which has long been rumored to house classified aerospace projects. A third possibility is the legendary Groom Lake facility, better known as Area 51, though some argue that the base has long since shifted its most sensitive programs elsewhere. Regardless of the destination, one thing is clear. If an object of non-human origin were recovered, it would disappear into the deepest layers of secrecy. It would be examined by teams the public has never heard of. It would be analyzed with tools never shown to the scientific community. And whatever was learned, if anything, would be hidden behind a wall of classification that may never crumble. This is where the story becomes bigger than New Mexico, bigger than one crash, bigger than one rumor. Because the heart of this mystery is not the object itself, it is the silence. A silence that stretches back decades. A silence that has survived whistleblowers, testimonies, leaked videos, congressional hearings, and public pressure. A silence that suggests the truth may be too vast, too disruptive, or too dangerous for the world to confront. But silence has a way of breaking, and lately the cracks have been widening. The New Mexico incident may represent more than just another alleged crash. It may be a sign that whatever is happening in the skies above Earth is becoming harder to contain. More witnesses, more videos, more interference, more anomalies. Each year brings new evidence that we are standing at the edge of something extraordinary. And whether the government is ready to admit it or not, the world is starting to notice. Imagine for a moment that somewhere right now, behind reinforced steel doors and biometric locks, a team of scientists is studying fragments from an object recovered that night. Imagine that the materials do not behave like anything known to chemistry. Imagine that the craft's structure bends light, defies gravity, or pulses with energy that cannot be measured with existing instruments. Imagine that the technology inside represents a 1,000-year leap forward, a glimpse of a future humanity has not yet earned. If even a fraction of that is true, then the discovery would be the most important moment in modern history. And yet, we might never be told, which leads to the final inevitable question: why here? Why New Mexico? Why does this land continue to draw these mysteries to its deserts, its mountains, its skies? Perhaps it is coincidence, perhaps it is geography, or perhaps this state, with its vast stretches of uninhabited land and its deep military roots, has always been the perfect stage for encounters humanity is not ready to face. And maybe, just maybe, the visitors know that. The New Mexico crash of 2025 may be real. It may be misunderstood, or it may be something far stranger than we can imagine. But whatever the truth is, it has reignited a fire that has burned quietly for decades. A fire that grows with every unanswered question, every government dodge, every mysterious night in the desert. Humanity is approaching a revelation. Something is happening above our heads, and perhaps beneath our feet as well. The sky is no longer empty. The desert is no longer silent. The truth is no longer distant. It is here, lingering just beyond the edge of certainty. And when the silence finally breaks, the Sirius Hub will be here to tell the story.